Kylo Ren is the fastest deck in all of Star Wars Unlimited. Hello and welcome to the table, and today I'm going to be doing a deck tech video for Kylo Ren Rash and Deadly, the deck that can win on turn 3, if not turn 4. Stay tuned for the MVP of the deck and why exactly this deck can win on turn 3, if not turn 4. So, with all that aside, let's talk about what this deck is going to do, and that's just flood the board as quickly as possible, get rid of your entire hand by the time that you flip Kylo, because once you have 4 resources, you can flip Kylo into a 5/4. That is insane. However, it gets -1 power for each card in your hand. But if you have no cards left, well, then this is just a free 5/4 body, which is so unbelievably good. And if you don't have the ways to get rid of your entire hand by the time that you can flip Kylo out, then don't worry. The front side of Kylo allows you to exhaust him, discard a card from your hand, and give a +2 power buff to a thing. It's not wonderful. That's not the strongest thing in the world. But if you need it, you need it. And it works, especially if you have 2 of the better cards in this deck out alongside Kylo Ren's front side ability or whatever. Migs Mayfeld, a 2-resource 2/2 that says whenever a player discards a card from their hand, you can deal 2 damage to a unit or a base only once a round, but it can still allow you to get extra value out of Kylo Ren's ability, which normally is not very good, but in combination with Migs is a lot better. And it also gets a lot better if you discard a card like Kylo's TIE Silencer, which, for 2 resources, it's a 3/2 space unit that has the action ability of, if you discard it from your hand this turn, you can play it from your discard pile, paying its resource cost. So you can get a +2 power buff out of the Kylo Ren's ability, and then for 2 more resources, you can play the Kylo's TIE Silencer from your discard pile, which is just great. But before I get into most of the cards in this deck, you might be wondering, why is this a double red deck? Why are you not playing something like yellow or blue or green in this deck alongside of Kylo? Because you get access to some really powerful double red cards, such as Bo-Katan Kryze, a 2-resource 3/3. That's all that really matters. It's just a really solid above-rate body. Cards like Saw Gerrera, a really solid 2 of in this deck, a 4-resource 5/4 that says, as an additional cost for each opponent to play an event, they must deal 2 damage to their base. So unbelievably strong. And then lastly, the Chaos War, a 3-resource event that says, deal damage to each player's base equal to the number of cards in their hand. Which is really solid, especially if your opponent just killed something like a Guavian Antagonizer, a card I haven't seen in a ton of decks, because this card isn't great a lot of the time. It's a 1-resource 2/3 with Saboteur, which is solid, but it also has the bounty of drawing a card. So your opponent kills this, they get to draw a card, and sure, it's a 2/3 body, which is a little bit better than the Death Star Stormtrooper 3/1 body, but it doesn't deal as much damage. And the whole goal of this deck is to deal a ton of damage, so why would you run this card in the deck? Because it takes a little bit of pressure off of you if your opponent wants to kill this thing, and off of your other units, so they get to then draw a card, and then you can play something like the Chaos War and punish the opponent for putting their resources towards killing that Guavian Antagonizer, doing an extra damage to them, and just making them kind of feel bad about it. But then the rest of the deck is just really solid 1-drops, really solid 2-drops, really solid 3-drops, and a couple of really good 4-drops that make this deck, that is the reason for this deck being able to put your opponent to such a low amount of life by the time that you flip Kylo out. So getting into the 1-drops, there are 3 copies of Death Star Stormtrooper, a 1-resource 3/1. It's a Savannah Alliance of Star Wars. The card's just unbelievably strong, and if you don't play it in Kylo, then there's something wrong with you. I'm sorry. But then there's Benthic 2 Tubes, a 1-resource 2/2 that says on attack deal, another aggressive unit gets +2 power for the turn, getting raid 1. It's not +2 power, but it might as well be. But then there's Ruthless Raider, which looks a little bit worse than the Death Star Stormtrooper and Benthic 2 Tubes off the bat, because it's a 1-resource 2/1 that deals 1 damage to each base when it's played, which is fine, I guess. However, you can look at the smuggle side of it, you can resource it, and then later on get value out of it, and it's just a really flexible card. It doesn't deal as much damage as the Stormtrooper or the 2 Tubes, but it can still be very flexible and deal those last couple of points of damage if you need it. Then there's Daring Raid, a 1-resource. It's a 2 in the deck because it just deals 2 damage to a unit or base. It's really solid when you need it. Otherwise, it's just like, hey, let's just resource it. Or you can discard it to Kylo's ability. Then there's, I've already talked about Guabi and Antagonizer, but then there's TIE Fighter, a 3 of in the deck, a 1 resource 2/1. It's the space version of Death Star Stormtrooper in my opinion, and the card's just really solid in this deck. But then getting into the 2 drops, I got Partisan Insurgent, 3 of, 2 resources, 1/4. If you have an aggressive unit out, which you're pretty much always going to, it has raid 2, so it's a 3/4 on a 2 resource body. That's pretty good. Then there's Wolfie, a 2 resource 3/2 with Saboteur, which is good. I mean, it matters sometimes, but it doesn't seem as good as the Partisan Insurgent. But then you look at it, and then you see why this is a 2 of in the deck. Because it says when played and on attack, bases cannot be dealt or cannot be healed for this phase, which is really solid against decks like Rey, or any deck that wants to gain some life and just kind of postpone the game, get into the later portions of the game to allow them to set up, steamroll Kylo. But then there's also Armed to the Teeth, and they're a solid 2 up in the deck. It's kind of like a Benthic 2 Tubes. It's slightly worse, but slightly more flexible because like the Reckless Gunslinger, it has Smuggle. But it's a 2 resource upgrade that gives +2 power to the upgrade unit. And when that upgrade unit attacks, you give another +2 power buff to a Thane for the phase. Not rate 2, a +2 power buff. So it's around as powerful as the Benthic 2 Tubes because of its flexibility and just a flat out 2 power buff instead of rate 2. But then Kylo's TIE Silencer, Migs, and Bo-Katan, I've already talked about all of those. Really solid units. But then getting into the 3 cost cards, we got 3 copies of Fifth Brother, the best 3 resource unit in this entire deck, easily. It's a 3 resource 2/4 body that gets raid 1 for each damage on it. Pretty solid right off the bat. And on attack, deal 1 damage to itself and 1 damage to another ground unit. You may, but you're pretty much always going to, because you can deal so much damage with this. You can mow down your opponent's threats a little bit, get this guy up, and just deal tons of damage with it and make him a really scary threat for your opponents. But then the Punishing one is basically the space version of Fifth Brother in this deck. It's a space unit, it's a 3/4, really solid body. But the thing that matters is when an upgraded enemy unit is defeated, you may ready this card only once a round, but that's still kind of nuts because you can get a ton of extra value out of it by getting to attack with it twice in a turn. And it's not going to happen that often, but when it does, it really matters and can really help you. But most of the time, it's just a 3 resource, 3/4 in space, which is still really solid. But then lastly, there's the 4 resource, absolutely S tier unit in this deck, Hunter Nexu. A 4/4 that, similarly to Partisan Insurgent, if you have another aggressive unit out, which you're always going to, it gets raid 2. So it's a 6/4 for 4 resources. That is insanely good. So yeah, this deck seems pretty nuts. But then there's the MVP of the deck, which kind of holds it all together, which it's in a lot of other decks, but it's really especially good in this deck because this deck just rushes down the opponent so quickly, and this can deal so much extra damage to allow the games to just close quicker and more efficiently. That card being Fallen Lightsaber, a 3 resource upgrade that gives a +3/+3 buff that says attached to a non-vehicle unit. If the attached unit is a force unit, it gains on attack deal 1 damage to each ground unit the defending player controls. It mows down the opponent's threats. It gives a +3/+3 buff. It is just unbelievably strong, especially if you put it on Kylo Ren, and it's just, oh my goodness. It turns Kylo Ren from a 5/4 a lot of the time, or if you have this in your hand, Kylo Ren's like a 4/4 or whatever, then you play this on Kylo, and it goes from a 4/4 to an 8/7. It is unbelievably strong, and I cannot underestimate just how powerful Fallen Lightsaber is in this deck, how strong this deck is, how quick this deck is, and how easily it can close out games, especially if you can get down to no cards in hand when you flip Kylo, making it a lot easier. Still a Glass Cannon deck, but it's a lot more consistent than a lot of Kylo decks out there that I've seen, or at least that I've play tested with. This deck is an absolute blast. It's not always going to win games, but it is really fun when you do, and it makes you feel like you're on top of the world. But anyways, with all that aside, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's completely free, you won't regret it. And I hope that you enjoy this deck, hope that you enjoy this video, and I hope you're all enjoying Shadows of the Galaxy.